Located on the shores of the Athabasca River, the small hamlet of Fort McKay is home to approximately 700 First Nations peoples, primarily of Dene, Cree, and Métis heritage. While serene in its quaint beauty, the people of Fort McKay are fighting for everything. They're watching as the land around them is literally being torn from under their feet. This is because Fort McKay is situated at the geographic center of the Alberta Tar Sands. The tar sands is actually 3 massive deposits of bitumen, the largest called the Athabasca Oil Sands. Together, the tar sands is estimated to contain 1.7 trillion barrels of bitumen, an amount comparable in magnitude to the world's total proven reserves of conventional petroleum.
We're either going to be dependent on dirty oil from the Gulf or dependent on dirty oil from Canada.
Employing tens of thousands of people, the tar sands is the major source of petroleum exports to the United States of America. As of 2010, oil sands production had increased to over 1.6 million barrels per day, where 53% of this was produced by surface and mining and 47% by in situ. The Alberta government believes this level of production could reach 3.5 million barrels per day and possibly 5 million barrels per day by 2030. Major corporations are digging up the earth around Fort McKay, refining it, releasing vast arrays of toxins into the environment, and selling their oil products to an increasing number of countries. How can a small community combat the forces at work against them? How can the people of Fort McKay push back and try to slow or perhaps stop this multi-trillion-dollar giant of an industry? Because if the projections of development of this area continues, the peoples of Fort McKay will either move or be slowly poisoned into extinction. First Nations culture is so intricately intertwined with the land. All that lives on, under, and above the land is part of the individual and is seen as inseparable of thought or body. I fear the latter will occur, as leaving the land would perhaps be the equivalent to leaving your body and your mind. This option is not an option, but an impossibility.
The Alberta tar sands lie under boreal forests drained by the Athabasca River as it flows northward. Where the river empties into the lake, it forms one of the world's great freshwater delta ecosystems.
Under Canadian law and British imperial law, that the Cree people owned that part of Alberta. The most important promise in the treaty is that the Cree Indians would have the right to hunt and fish. Except now, if you look at northern Alberta, particularly northeastern Alberta, where the tar sands developments are, the developments are so vast, the disruption of the landscape is so extensive, that it's now fair to say that treaty rights themselves can no longer be meaningfully exercised because the habitat of the animals is being destroyed right before our eyes.
While the tar sands perhaps serves as an extreme example, the challenges that face First Nations cultures to retain their way of life present themselves throughout Canada. I believe education is a key strategy to promote traditional culture and ways of life. Educational policy, currently steeped in the scientific approach of Western thought, is being challenged in many parts of Canada, and Indigenous groups advocate for Indigenous knowledge to be present within a culturally responsible curricula. For example, regions of northern Canada have made great strides to adopt culturally sensitive curricula, namely the Inuit Quajimajet, also known as IQ, which is the education framework for Nunavut curriculum. And as changes to curricula are made, the tools and resources with which to teach are reconsidered. Over the past decade, digital tools such as cameras and computers have been used to try to foster an increased interest in learning in general. These tools are being used in an increasing variety of ways, from helping preserve the languages of Indigenous peoples, to sharing stories of First Nations youth, to sharing aspects of culture which have been secret in past generations. The tools lend themselves to traditional cultures reliant on oral presentation, whereas print media or conventional classroom language instruction are difficult to use in such cultures. As part of an approach to increasing motivation in learning, and in turn to revitalizing Indigenous culture, I believe that gaming is one tool that is often overlooked and undervalued, and could re-engage youth who feel disconnected with their cultural roots. Many parents have argued that video games are a waste of time, that they rot the brain. The truth is that there is now considerable amounts of evidence and research which shows that video games and the learning strategies employed through video games is beneficial to learning. Dr. Judy Willis presents a brain-based argument supporting the use of video games as a learning tool.
Hi, I'm Judy Willis, and I am a neurologist. I've been a neurologist for 15 years, and after the 15 years, my patient practice really changed. I started getting so many referrals for kids whose teachers thought they had ADD, obsessive-compulsive disorder, staring spell seizures, petit mal epilepsy, and the increase was huge, and yet the kids had no greater incidence of it. And I saw the notes were coming from the schools, so I visited the schools. I'd look in the classrooms, and I saw kids who indeed were playing with everything they could find, staring out the window, coloring on someone's chair or book. The problem was that the way they were being taught was lectured. There were kids sitting in rows in first grade, just listening to information or filling out worksheets. And I know the brain goes into a state of stress from boredom. So it was my idea that I'd go to school, get a teaching credential, become a teacher, and I did it for the past 10 years. I taught 2nd grade, 5th grade, and 7th grade, and applied what I know about the brain to the classroom, and found that just making subtle, easy changes that anyone could do got kids back in the state of voluntary behavior. And they learned easily, and they were successful. Their mindsets changed. We have some concerns. Parents, teachers have some concerns of the amount of time kids play on the computer, play with their video games. What is it that's happening in a video game in the brain, and how does that turn into a classroom model? First of all, a video game, you enter it at level 1. But where do you start playing the game for real? If you can do what's at level 1 on a 10-level video game, you go right to level 2. If you can do the task at level 2 without any effort, you just do it. You go right to level 3. Let's say at level 3, there's a task that you don't really know how to do. Then you're at your achievable challenge level. Whereas if it made you stay at level 1 for 2 hours, or you're in the classroom and you already know how to multiply 5 times 5, and yet the class is doing repetition of that drill, first of all, your brain's going to get into a stress state, and there's not going to be any interest. The brain knows that. There's no fun in it because there's no prediction, there's no reward. Here we go. Then the brain is entered at its achievable challenge level. That's perfect. What else does a video game do? It gives you feedback. It gives you incremental progress feedback. So along the way in a classroom, your feedback might be the test at the end of the week. In a video game, you see what's happening with your effort, with your trial and error. You're getting corrective feedback at a time you really want it, because you want to achieve the challenge that's right there. And you pay attention to the feedback. You use it. No one else is seeing you make mistakes, so you're not in a risk state. So you're attentive. You want to know what's there to be learned. Now, the best part of it is you put in the effort, they see their score going up, they get to level 4. And what's waiting for them at level 4? No prizes, no money, no people coming out and hugging them, giving them 5. Harder work. What did they get? Harder work. That should be the classroom model, and we can do it. In a classroom, thinking about what level is appropriate for each child, what is their achievable challenge level, and doing as much as you can to differentiate so they're in groups at that level, and showing them their incremental progress toward a goal throughout the learning period, looking at their work and group work or at their paper while they're doing it, looking at their whiteboard responses, showing them progress. It's intrinsic reinforcement that's going to get the dopamine out, not giving them candy. It's their recognizing, I got it. That's the lights up the brain.